I got a good job right out of college, which never happens. But I stopped telling people this when they reminded me where I was. Because in order to get this job, I had to move to the middle of nowhere. The Kansas City area became my home. The borderland between nothing and nowhere was where I ended up after years of good grades. It actually wasn't as bad or as boring as I thought it would be. It was pretty much the same thing as home. Maybe a few less people and mountains. And the storms were super badass, but outside of this, there wasn't much difference in the 1,800 miles between here and there. I met Nick at the office building where I worked. He worked as one of the building custodians, and I was a team manager for a company renting a whole floor in the building. Our paths crossed in the fluorescent lit hallways and bustling elevator rides. He mostly kept a respectful distance. It was I who pursued him, though I wouldn't have if I thought he didn't like it. If for a moment I thought it made him uncomfortable. I would have been entirely embarrassed if after all this I didn't even have a chance. No, I knew what I was doing. His eyes told me everything I needed to know. A month after we started dating, he left his job for a similar one. It didn't matter to me where he worked. There was never an imbalance of power within our relationship, though there was a difference in education and income. I didn't care. He was smarter than me anyway. Though he thought about our differences a little more than I did, it still wasn't much. Mostly we did very well to just get along as two normal people who liked each other. 6 months into our relationship, we made the leap and moved in together. Some might say it was too soon, but I knew from the moment he was inside me for the first time I didn't want to let him go. We fell into a routine, navigating life together. Our biggest disagreement was over whether to upgrade it to a fancier apartment. I wanted the luxuries which came with my job, like a new washer and dryer, but he preferred to keep things simple. Money was tight for him, and I understood, but part of me wanted to indulge in the fruits of my labor. Despite our differences, we were happy. We didn't pry into each other's pasts, content to focus on the present and future. It didn't matter where we came from. All that mattered was where we were going. I felt lucky every day to wake up next to him, to see his smile and feel his warmth beside me. Growing up in Seattle, I never imagined I'd find myself in Overland Park, Kansas, but here I was, happier than I had ever been. I brushed off the quirks and idiosyncrasies of our life together, believing they were part of what made us unique. But there was one thing I couldn't ignore: his anxiety every first Wednesday of the month at 11:00 a.m. That was when they tested the tornado sirens. Living in Kansas, the possibility of tornadoes were a fact of life, but for him, they were a source of deep-seated fear. No matter how many times they went through those monthly drills, and how easily everyone else ignored them, he couldn't shake the panic which gripped him each time. And I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe there was more to his fear than met the eye. Early on a Sunday morning, the tranquility of our apartment was shattered by a persistent knock at the door. At first, it was a faint tapping, but it grew louder and more insistent with each passing moment. Nick, still lost in the depths of sleep, remained oblivious to the intrusion. I, however, was jolted awake by the unwelcome sound. I slipped out of bed, the cool air prickling my bare skin, and hastily pulled on a pair of gray sweatshorts from the dresser. The knocking continued unabated, and I silently cursed whoever was on the other side for disturbing our peaceful morning. As I tiptoed towards the door, I hoped Nick's slumber would remain undisturbed, but his restless stirring and sighs showed otherwise. Grabbing my phone from the charger, I groggily checked the time. To my surprise, it was already past noon. The realization dawned on me that it wasn't as early as I initially thought. With a pang of annoyance, I remembered the new apartment we were considering, a secure building with a remote viewing and intercom system. If only we had moved there already, I wouldn't have to squint through the peephole to identify our unexpected visitor. Securing the door with the chain lock, I cautiously peeked through the crack. "Travis Wilt?" The man on the other side greeted me by my full name, which made me more nervous. Who was he, and what did he want? His last name sounded familiar, as was the familiar way he looked at me with confusion. Then it hit me. He shared the same last name as Nick, and now that I looked closer, there was a striking resemblance between them. Despite my better judgment, I hesitated for only a moment before swinging the door open wider. Nick materialized behind me, hastily wrapping his robe around his half-dressed form. His eyes widened in shock as he beheld the man before us. "Hi, Dad," he murmured, the words heavy with unspoken tension. I hesitated for only a moment before reluctantly inviting Nick's father into our home. I didn't want to get too involved, but I also couldn't bring myself to stand idly by in the midst of what was unfolding. As they settled into an uneasy conversation, I retreated to the open kitchen, pretending to busy myself with making coffee. Nick's father wasted no time in getting to the point, questioning his son about his intentions for staying in the area. The tension in the room thickened as he broached the subject of Nick returning home and seeking the help he claimed he needed. I couldn't help but eavesdrop. Most of Nick's past was a mystery to me. Whenever I thought about asking him, I instead imagined a tall brick wall. Their voices rose in argument and I abandoned my pretense of busying myself with the coffee. I wanted answers, and I wanted them now. Nick insisted he didn't need help, but his father was adamant, revealing a painful truth that sent shockwaves through the room. His words cut through the air like a knife, revealing a haunting past Nick kept hidden from me. His mother died in a tornado, shielding him from harm. The image of a 7-year-old Nick being rescued from beneath his mother's lifeless body was too much to try to imagine. I couldn't believe he actually lived it. How does someone come back from that? But the horror didn't end there. His father's trembling voice continued, recounting his childhood belief in butterfly people who supposedly protected him and took his mother away before she could be consumed by shadow people. It was a surreal revelation I couldn't fully understand. Before I could process it all, Nick's rage exploded. In a blur of movement, his fist collided with his father's face, a gesture born of pain and anger that mirrored the turmoil raging within me. I rushed to his side, ready to defend him against any further onslaught. But as I faced Nick's father, my own fury boiling over, Nick stormed off to our bedroom, leaving me to confront the man who shattered our world. "How dare you?" My voice trembled with suppressed rage. But before I could demand answers or throw him out, Nick appeared, dressed and determined, and without a word or making eye contact, he stormed past us out the front door. As I watched him leave, a bitter taste of betrayal and uncertainty lingered in the air. Nick's father wiped blood from his lip, his expression grave. "You deserve to know," he muttered, his words heavy with regret. "He isn't well." I stood there, trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief, as that man continued to darken our foyer, his words like smog clouding our pure air. The audacity to come into our home and dredge up painful memories, to cast doubt on our relationship and question Nick's well-being. I honestly had no idea people like him existed in the real world. Not only could someone be so open about their hatred, but have so much hatred for their own child. Thinking about it caused me immense physical pain through my chest and up into my jaw. Or was I clenching it that hard? "Get out," I demanded, my voice barely above a whisper, but laced with a steely determination. In that moment, it clicked how I fit into all of it. But he didn't budge. He continued his tirade as if I hadn't spoken. My patience worn thin, I warned him again, threatening to resort to physical force if necessary. And when he persisted, I made good on my promise. With a surge of adrenaline, I lunged forward, gripped layers of his shirts and jacket with both hands and hurled him across the hallway with all the force I could muster. The sickening thud as his body collided with the wall echoed through the wing, a stark broadcast of the violence that just erupted. In that moment, I was acutely aware of the eyes of our neighbors upon us, no doubt shocked by the sudden commotion. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered except finding Nick and making things right. As I hastily dressed, the weight of what happened settled heavily on my shoulders. Assaulting my boyfriend's father within minutes of meeting him. What kind of person did that make me? But in the grand scheme of things, it was a minor concern compared to the turmoil raging inside me. Although I risked going to jail and legal problems I didn't need, I only had one task on my mind. I knew where he would be. I could picture him sitting alone in the gazebo at the park down the street, the rain pouring down outside of his small bubble. On my way down the stairs, I pulled out my phone and called my parents, my fingers trembling as I tried to compose myself. I thanked them for being good, and I told them I loved them. I didn't want to worry them, though I could hear their concern. Just wanted to let them know that I was happy and thank them again before promising to call the next day after work. The rain soaked through my clothes as I made my way to the park, each step heavier than the last. And as I approached the gazebo, I saw him sitting there, drenched and lost in thought. In that moment, I knew that whatever secrets he was hiding, whatever demons he was battling, I wouldn't let him continue on all alone. I stopped a few feet away from the picnic table where he sat, his figure hunched and cold by the sudden downpour. The fear in his eyes pierced through me, igniting a fierce protectiveness within. Without hesitation, I closed the distance between us, wrapped my arms around him and pulled him close. I don't think he knew how much more I needed him than he needed me, because I didn't know until that moment. I held his face where it nestled into my neck, hoping the trembling would stop both outside and within. I held him tightly, feeling the weight of his sobs reverberate through his body. In that moment, words were unnecessary. I understood without him having to say a single thing. It was as if we spoke a language of our own, one born of shared experiences and unspoken understanding. I held him until his trembling subsided, the rain gradually easing into a gentle drizzle. With a tenderness born of love and concern, I pulled back slightly to gaze into his tear-streaked face. "I love you no matter what," I whispered, the words carrying the weight of my unwavering devotion. He met my gaze, his eyes reflecting a mixture of gratitude and vulnerability. And then, with a hesitant half-smile, he nodded, a silent agreement to whatever lay ahead. "But we're not leaving here until we finally know everything," I declared, determination coursing through my veins. I couldn't bear the thought of him suffering alone. I couldn't imagine how else we'd be able to move forward if this wasn't addressed. At first he seemed apprehensive. I assured him he could take as much time as he needed. I mean, the last time he told this story, it ended up not only destroying relationships, but ruined the life he knew. Eventually, with a resigned acceptance, he nodded once more, and as the rain continued to fall around us, we promised to face whatever challenges lay ahead together, instead of separately falling apart. "And if we need help, if we need therapy," I continued, my voice steady despite the uncertainty that lingered in the air, "then we'll do that too." Another slow nod followed, a silent acknowledgement of the difficult journey that lay ahead. As the rain continued to fall around us, we sat in the shelter of the gazebo, baring our souls to each other in a way we never had before. I started, sharing every embarrassing detail, every quirky habit, until I found myself listing off kinks and desires I never dared to voice aloud. It was liberating to let down my guard and reveal the depths of my desires to the man I loved. And then it was his turn. At first, I laughed along with him, the tension easing with each shared secret. But as he delved deeper into his past, into the memories he kept hidden for so long, the laughter faded, replaced by a somber silence broken only by the sound of his voice. He spoke of the butterfly people, of beings he was adamant were not guardian angels, but something altogether different. He described them with such clarity, such conviction, that I found myself hanging on to his every word. He spoke of the day the tornado tore through Joplin, of how he watched as his mother's soul was carried away by these mysterious beings, protected from the dangers of the world beyond. In that moment, I felt something shift within me. I had always been skeptical, questioning everything I encountered, even the things I knew to be true. But as I listened to his story, something changed. I didn't just believe him, I believed in him. I believed in the power of his conviction, in the unwavering faith he held in the existence of something greater than ourselves. I may never know the truth of his experiences, may never fully understand the mysteries he holds within him, but what mattered was that he did. He believed in the existence of goodness and light in a world that had become increasingly dark and destructive. And in that belief, I found hope. Hope that even in the face of unimaginable tragedy, there was still light to be found. Hope that maybe there was something worth believing in after all. And as the rain tapered around us, I promised to protect him, to hold him close and never let go.